From the little scientist being a little more social than we expected, to him meeting his physics hero for the first time twice. Here are some of the young Sheldon plot holes fans missed. Dr. Sheldon Lee Cooper, PhD, might have an eidetic memory, but I can't say the same for the creators of the series, because there are many continuity errors in both The Big Bang Theory and its prequel, Young Sheldon. And while fans are quick to pick on these tiny details, some slip right past their eyes, but don't worry, because I got your back with a list of Young Sheldon things that just don't add up. Let's kick it off with Lil Sheldon and his buddies. Adult Sheldon doesn't have many friends, and even the ones he does have, it's not rare for them to regret their bond with the quirky physicist. And throughout The Big Bang Theory, he makes sure to tell everyone he had no social life growing up, and neither did he want any. But Shelley's younger version in the prequel turned out to be a little too social, and the kid had a handful of people he'd call his buddies. The creators did try to address this plot hole by adding Tam, Sheldon's best bud in the OG series, but what about everyone else? Are we just supposed to forget about Paige? Or his college dorm mates he played Dungeons and Dragons with?
Do you play D&D?
No, I actually just sit in my dorm room and study because I have no friends.
That's a bummer.
Believe me, Sheldon having buddies in college was quite the shocker. But staying true to the boy genius's character wouldn't have made an interesting storyline, so the showrunners were made to get a little creative with it. Another thing that just didn't make sense was Sheldon's dad and his apparent alcoholism. From Sheldon's recollections in The Big Bang Theory, his dad was a pretty absent father, and he'd spend many nights away from home. But Lance Barber's George Cooper Sr. came off as very likable at the start. Sure, he did like hanging out at the bar, and we mostly saw him drinking a beer at home, but the guy was hardly intoxicated. He came off as more of a family man and a big old softie stuck in an unhappy marriage. So the only way his so-called alcoholism makes sense is if we pin it on Sheldon's imagination. George Sr. was hardly seen without a can of beer, which led to Sheldon believing he was an alcoholic, even though he was never really drunk. While we're on the subject of George, I've got another bone to pick with the showrunners. According to adult Sheldon, his father was mostly absent and didn't care about what was going on with his family. But that's hardly the case in Young Sheldon. Yes, George Sr. won't be winning a Best Dad award anytime soon, and he wasn't very involved or even affectionate with his kids, but he did have his moments. Chances are that Sheldon let the bad overshadow the good, and that created a horrible perception of his dad. So at the end, all that was left of his dad was a compilation of his terrible moments, which hardly told the complete story. It could be because he lost his father at a very young age, and in order to keep himself from hurting, Lil Shelley turned him into a villain of some sort. Moving on, there's one more Mr. Cooper-related grievance on the list. Did you know that Lance Barber actually appeared on The Big Bang Theory? Remember Leonard's childhood bully, Jimmy Speckerman? He was played by the same actor who played George Sr.
Junior prom. That was not cool, man. I am so sorry.
And it didn't make any sense when Leonard confronted him along with the whole gang, which of course included Sheldon. Still, the boy genius didn't note that the bully looked super similar to his dad. But we can cut them some slack for this, considering it happened 6 years before Young Sheldon went under development, and the casting directors were probably banking on fans forgetting the whole thing. But hey, the internet doesn't forget a thing, just like the nature of Mary and George's relationship. The two were supposed to be one hell of a toxic couple, with them arguing pretty much all the time. But guess what? That didn't happen in the prequel. They did have a lot of spats, but just like any normal married couple would have. Besides, they argued about pretty normal things, chores, finances, children, nothing serious. Of course, things got serious when Georgie got Mandy pregnant, but even that can be justified, because the couple was in a very troubling position. The showrunners did catch on to this, slowly making their arguments more and more serious. Because after all, it's all leading to the big finale of George's infidelity followed by his death. Speaking of, fans find it hard to picture Lance's George as someone who'd cheat, and in order to cushion the blow, the creators decided to ruin Mary. Season 7 is presumably the show's last season, with Sheldon's time at college coming to an end. This means the creators don't have much time to fit in some of the big storylines, mainly including George's affair with Brenda. But even though they tried to sidestep it, I can assure you the show's headed in that direction, and they'll be knocking down a few people along the way, like Mary Cooper. The series shows her warming up to Pastor Rob, hinting that something inappropriate might happen between the two of them.
That's what I was hoping.
Why are you in my bed?
Why are you? This is wrong.
And let's not deny the obvious. They clearly have feelings for each other, and even Missy knows that.
Someday we'll talk about Mom and Pastor Rob.
What's annoying about this is that there's no mention of such an affair in The Big Bang Theory. On top of this, here's the million-dollar question for you. Can you really imagine Mary Cooper committing adultery? The same Mary who went on the Christian cruise called the Born Again boat ride. The show did justify their plot hole by making her potential lover a pastor. But still, something doesn't sit right here. Plus, the prequel portrays George in more of a sympathetic light, showing him and Barbara feeling sorry for their actions. But as for Mary, she gulps a pint of self-righteous drink and completely ignores her situation, and it doesn't align with her character in The Big Bang Theory at all. Moving on, we couldn't possibly forget Dr. Sturgis, but The Big Bang Theory did. Mima's boyfriend, Dr. Sturgis, wound up being one of our favorite characters in the series. When Sheldon had no one to communicate with on his level, he turned to the doc and ended up forming a close relationship with him. Dr. Sturgis even played a big role during some super important years of Sheldon's life, which is weird because the Sheldon we know doesn't bond with people so easily. Everyone saw how he weirded out the OG Professor Proton, but he still considered him a mentor long after his death. What about Dr. Sturgis, though, who fit that role perfectly? Well, he never got his 15 minutes of fame in the original series, not even towards the end, which is confusing because Sheldon shouldn't have forgotten him so easily. Another inconsistency that made fans scratch their heads was Sheldon's safety whistle. In one of the episodes of The Big Bang Theory, the physicist is showing his buddies the contents of his bag. And guess what? A safety whistle is in there, which was apparently gifted to him by his girlfriend, Amy. Get this, in one of the episodes of Young Sheldon, Lil Shelley is shown to have the same whistle. Chances are that Amy knew about it and got him a similar one. But still, it's odd for adult Sheldon to not share the origin of the whistle with his friends. And here's one that's really puzzled fans. In the world of physics, Sheldon had a few heroes that he idolized, and one of them is Stephen Hawking. In The Big Bang Theory, the boy genius is beyond excited to meet his hero for the first time. But in one of the Young Sheldon episodes, young Shelley travels all the way to Pasadena with his father in an all-expenses-paid trip, just to see one of Hawking's lectures. I know the two didn't exactly meet face-to-face, but it still feels like something adult Sheldon would have recalled later on. I mean, he loves talking about the time he made a road trip to see Will Wheaton, but Will never showed up at the Star Trek convention, so mentioning a trip to Pasadena just to see Hawking would have made perfect sense. And there you have it, from the young genius meeting his physics hero for the first time twice, to his younger version being a little more social than we expected. That's all for some of the Young Sheldon plot holes fans missed.